Hey, what's going on, APUSH peeps? We have one of the most important elections in U.S. history for you today. This one is specifically mentioned in the new APUSH curriculum. This one is the election of 1860, so be familiar with this. It will be on your test in some way, shape, or form. I can virtually guarantee you. All right, let's do some background info on this election. James Buchanan, who was the incumbent or the sitting vice president, is not running for re-election, and there is Mr. Buchanan down there. The Democratic Party was split along sectional lines along the North and the South due to, in part, Douglas's Freeport Doctrine, which he talked about in the Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858, in which he said if a territory wanted to or a state wanted to, they could essentially forbid slavery, even though the Supreme Court said that could not happen. If you want more info, check out my video on the Lincoln-Douglas debates. I have a link to it in the description below. John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry took place 1 year before in 1859, and there is John Brown. He was put to death for his involvement in the raid. Again, I do have a video on that as well. And many people in the South feared that the Republicans in the North were dominated by these John Brown-loving abolitionists. So there's this fear in the South that the North is going to eventually eliminate slavery. So all this is kind of in the background as the election of 1860 approaches. So let's get to the candidates. Well, for the Democratic candidates, there are actually two of them. The first one is this guy, Stephen Douglas. We know him as an advocate of popular sovereignty. Take a minute, think about what is popular sovereignty. You know it. What is it? If you said it is allowing the people in the territory to vote on the issue of slavery, you are 100% correct. Very nice job. Now, in the South, they do not support Stephen Douglas. They turned on him after the Freeport Doctrine. So they support the sitting vice president, John C. Breckinridge, who was Buchanan's vice president. He is from Kentucky. So there are two Democrats running, and you have one Republican candidate, this guy, Abe Lincoln. Now, he is campaigning on a free soil platform. You need to understand this, please. I beg you. He campaigned on the non-extension of slavery. He did not campaign to get rid of slavery. The Republicans did not campaign on getting rid of slavery. Rather, they campaigned, and Lincoln campaigned, on not allowing slavery to expand or spread. It's a very important distinction that you absolutely positively have to know. Now, there's a fourth party, the Constitutional Union Party, and this guy is running John Bell, and the whole purpose of this was that they wanted to preserve the Constitution and preserve the Union. Their platform was, we're going to abide by the Constitution. So four main players, let's figure out what the issues were. There's really no getting around it. The number one issue is slavery. Now, this is such a big issue because you have the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and the Dred Scott decision. All of those occurred within the previous 10 years of 1860. And they all fail to reduce sectional tension. So you have, again, the North and the South are really pitted against each other, and it's all over slavery. Now, many fire-eater Southerners threatened secession if Lincoln won. Now, they're called fire-eaters because they just threatened to break away from the country. So the South, many people in the South made it known, if a Republican wins the election of 1860, they're bailing on the Union. They're bouncing on out of this country. So let's go to the results. In order to become president, 152 electoral votes were needed at that time. Stephen Douglas only gets 12. He carries one state. Bell gets 39. He carries a couple more. Breckinridge gets 72. He carries most of the South. And Lincoln gets 180. Now let's take a look at this map. And you'll notice it says that Lincoln wins the election without carrying a single Southern state. And that's very important to understand. Because the population, most of the population is located in the North. Look at New York has 35 electoral votes. Pennsylvania has 27. Now remember, that is determined by the number of senators and members of the House of Representatives. You'll notice that the North has more of the population. So Lincoln is able to win, and he wins without a single state voting for him that owns slaves. So all the South votes for other people, but the North votes for Lincoln. The South is essentially going to say, we cannot be in this country if somebody can win the presidency without having a single person from the South vote for them. All right, let's talk about the impact. You have to know the impact. It is the immediate cause of the Civil War. Southern states begin to secede before Lincoln's inauguration on March 4th, 1861. Remember, it used to be March 4th. Then the 20th Amendment changes that to January 20th. So South Carolina on December 20th, 1860 leaves. A few weeks later, Mississippi leaves on January 9th, Florida the following day on the 10th, Alabama the day after that on the 11th, Georgia on the 19th of January, Louisiana on February 1st, and all of this is happening on Buchanan's watch. So before Lincoln even becomes president, 6 states seceded from the Union, and Buchanan did absolutely nothing to stop the secession. He didn't feel he had the power to do anything, so he essentially just sat back and did nothing. Now, more states seceded after the war officially started on April 12th, 1861. That's when the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter, and sadly, that is Henry Clay's birthday. The man who loved the Union and wanted to see it preserved. The Civil War actually started on his birthday. How's that for irony, huh? So Virginia, 5 days later, secedes and sides with the South, and Arkansas does as well on May 6th, and Tennessee does the next day on May 7th, and finally North Carolina is the last southern state to secede on May 20th. Now you'll notice all these orange states, these are the Confederate States of America. These are the southern states during the war. Now we see these yellow states here. These are very important. We're going to talk about them in the Civil War, and I do have a video on that. Check that out in the description below. These are called the border states, and they owned slaves, but they were part of the North during the Civil War. They did not break away. Very important to know because they are a huge, huge player in the Civil War. All right, let's finish up with some test tips for multiple choice and short answer questions. Absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Know that Lincoln's platform was for the non-extension of slavery, and also know that the election was an immediate cause of secession and the Civil War. For essay questions, you could talk about the failures of compromises that led to the election of 1860 and the Civil War. And you could even see an essay question on, the 1860 election as a turning point in U.S. history. So you'll have to talk about what life was like before 1860 and what it was like afterwards. All right, that's everything you need to know about the election of 1860. I thank you guys very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the section below. Make sure you also check out other videos that relate to this topic in the description. If you haven't already, please take a moment and subscribe to my channel and listen to Abe's message. It is one of the most important things you need to know about the 1860 election. Thank you for watching and have a good day.